Welcome to Brad's Fireside Chat. I've stopped counting how many we've done, but today I've got a fantastic special guest, Claire. So Claire, say hello to the audience. So some of you, if you work in Salt Lake, have had the opportunity probably to get to know Claire, but if you have not, he's a bit of a puzzle and an enigma. And so we actually started getting people requesting Claire to get involved in one of these fireside chats.
Requesting?
Absolutely, you are requested. By request, that's what we'll call this one.
Okay.
So in the spirit of this really being an opportunity for us to talk a little bit about who you are, what you do for us, and what you did prior to coming to Go Engineer. That's where I want to start with you, because I know a little bit of that, and I'm guessing I'm going to learn some good stuff even right now. But why don't you walk us through professionally before you found us? What was the life and the day in the life of Claire for his career?
Let me just start from BYU. I graduated from BYU with a BS in mathematics. I then worked for Packard Bell for a small amount of time, doing tech support for them. Then me and a friend who worked at Packard Bell started an internet service provider business. And since I sucked at business, we didn't do very well.
Wait, how long did that ISP go? How long did you have that going?
The answer is we worked at that for about 2 years, but we then sold out to some investors, and then we got really frustrated with the investors and we quit. And then it went on for a while afterwards with some name changes, and I don't know where it's at anymore.
Yep.
And frankly, cool. I don't care.
Okay, and before we go to the next thing, I want to back up. And so everybody who's listening, because the rest of us in the world, when we were taking math in like high school and college, we were like, yeah, this is worthless. Why would I ever use this? But you actually majored in mathematics.
Yeah, it's fun.
What was, I love that. Like, you're the only person I know in the whole world that majored in mathematics. What was your dream job coming out of college with majoring in mathematics?
You misunderstand the motivation for mathematicians entirely.
That's exactly my point. I love that.
Mathematicians are just a bunch of guys who think that a bunch of numbers displayed in a particular way are pretty and entertaining and fascinating. And so we get together and we show off the beauty of our math, and then, so up on the whiteboard there'll be some sort of proof or whatever, and we'll go, look how great it is, and the other mathematician will go, ooh, ah, amazing. And that's pretty what math is at high levels. It's not a matter of let's see how many problems we can solve. It's a matter of how pretty is it to you and to other mathematicians.
That is so
and
cool.
So I didn't particularly do well in college as far as grades went. I was pretty much a C student.
Impressive. All right, so now I sidetracked you. You did your ISP, you sold that off to investors, and then you...
I went to work for one of our customers, a company called Equus International, where I did support for their Windows product. Then they started doing construction in the valley for the 2002 Olympics, and that increased my commute from 20 minutes to 45 minutes, and that was unbearable to me. So
right now everybody that's in California is like saying,
I don't care about
I love that.
I don't care about that. They've chosen their lives. I chose my life. My life involves no more than a 20-minute commute. If you guys want to live where you do 3-hour commutes, you're insane, and you can continue to live that way. Anyway, so I commute was 20 minutes, and then it was 45 minutes. I'm like, screw that, I'm not doing that. And I got a job in Chicago, and I worked out of Chicago.
Wait, so you moved to Chicago?
A suburb of Chicago. I'm
okay.
Not a real big city person and stayed the hell out of Chicago all the time.
Just out of curiosity, what was your commute there then?
It was 5 minutes.
Boom. Okay.
So the problem with that company, I really loved that company, except for one thing. Whenever I tried to acquire computers for our our new personnel, I'd call up a vendor and say, could I get a computer? And they say, not till you pay your bill. And I did that with 4 or 5 different companies. And it's just like, my company doesn't pay their bills. I wonder when they're not going to pay me. I decided that I didn't really want to work for them anymore because they were immoral. And so I quit and I moved to Portland before I got a job. Actually, that job search time in my life was pretty cool because there were 2 jobs that I didn't take that the job interview process was just amazing to me. There was a comic book company who was hiring a Solaris administrator. And I'm like, cool, I can do that. And I went in for the interview, prepared with my resume, and they handed me a application. They wanted me to fill out an application like I was a teenager, and I looked at them like, I ain't doing that bullshit. And I walked right on out of there. They're like, why are you leaving? I'm like, I'm not a child. This tells me that you think that I'm a child and you'll treat me like a child. Bye.
I love that we have our first curse word on our Fireside chat. That's fantastic. Thank you. That breaks the ice for future Fireside chats.
Oh, I think I gave one earlier.
All right. Probably did.
But we can still edit them all out.
I hope they don't. I'm really hoping they do not.
At that point, I didn't really feel like working at all, so I became a bum and started mooching off mom and dad. I was sitting there watching a lot of PBS shows, and they were showing a lot of evolution at that particular moment in time, and I'm like, I can model that in a database.
I was hoping you were going to tell the story, because this is still one of those first Claire interactions with Joel and myself and you, and whiteboarding up your idea of evolution for investments.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
So this is the way it started. I was watching a lot of evolutionary programs on PBS, and I eventually came to the point where I thought, you know what, I can model this in a MySQL database. So I thought, I don't know shit about MySQL, and so I started learning about MySQL, and I started learning about Perl, and I started learning about C and C++. And then my dad kept annoying me with questions about the stock market, because one of my previous jobs that I pretty much glazed over pretty quickly was a job where I was supporting Metastock, which is a Windows program that charts stock values. Anyway, so Dad kept asking me questions about the stock market, and I kept being annoyed by them, and I finally came to the conclusion that, you know, I could put the evolution thing to go with the stock market. And so I started programming that, and I worked on it for 2 or 3 months, and I got that to working really, really well, I thought. And here's the problem with mathematicians, is they just don't care about money. They just care if it works. And so I got it running to the point where I thought it was running real well without actually testing it against what the actual stock market was doing. Anyway, it was that point in my life that
Paul Mills shows up.
Yeah.
But I can't remember, why is it that we had planted in Paul? Did we need database help, or we needed somebody who could just program simplicity into our complex manual? What was the pitch to you about coming to Go Engineer?
So I was still being a bum, and Paul said, and I really didn't want a job at that particular point in time. And so Paul says, fill out a resume. And so on my resume, I filled out a resume, and it's fairly decent looking. But on the cover letter, I basically said, I'm really interested in this job, and but if Paul thinks you should hire me, then you should hire me. And so Earl still has that letter. So
that's fantastic. And what was the original, like, you show up and the first thing that Earl has you doing? Was it maintenance renewal automation, or was it something else?
at that point, Earl hired John, and not me, which was fine with me.
Well, John did have a cape and a cane, and you didn't have that, so. I'm just saying. Come on, can you fault us?
I cannot.
All right.
And I got a job teaching Linux for it must have been about 3 months that I had that job. The only problem with that is that my approach to teaching didn't work out the way that...
No, really? you don't have that typical instructor skill set?
Hell no.
That shocks me. That's fantastic.
Basically, I would go in there and say, I don't know, someone asked me a question, I'm like, I don't know, let's find the answer. And so I'd type it up on the screen and the answer would suddenly appear. And the students didn't like that, and since they were paying about $3,000 a pop, and they got to express their opinion at the end of the class about how well I was.
Your reviews were not rave reviews about.
No.
All right. Now, in your defense, you've taught Linux classes to small groups of employees here.
Yeah.
And you got great reviews.
I didn't know about great reviews.
Yeah, you did. Absolutely.
Cool.
So look at that.
Anyway, so I got fired/canned the same day.
There's a theme here in your job history. I'm not judging. I'm just saying there's a theme. That's all.
I quit.
All right.
I quit and got fired on the same day. Anyway, so then I came back to a Go Engineer and said, "Paul, still got that job available?" And by then Earl was really sick of John. And he's like, not yet, wait a day or two. And so a day or two passed, and I was thinking, that's not going to happen. I've got to go find something else. And it was about a day or two later that he got in contact with me, and I went in and had an interview with Earl. And the position that I applied for was, I edit the quotes out of that old Excel macro that you used to have to run.
Yep.
And then I would have to email out each quote individually with the signature from either Frank or
Raph.
Raph, yes.
Yep.
And just so you know, Frank and Raph were the CSRs when
They did the renewals. Yep.
So that was a lot of work, and I am a lazy man. And so the first thing that I did is like, I'm not doing this. I'm going to
Find a better way.
So I jumped into Perl, and I wrote a program that would send the emails automatically. And I screwed up the first email, and Frank was really pissed. And he wanted me to never do that again. And there was no way I was never going to do it again. So I then sent out Raph's, and his went out beautifully. And the next month came around, and I sent both Frank's and Raph's off beautifully. And I was, of course, modifying things quite a bit during that time period.
But just so the audience can get an appreciation, we're talking about something before you got your hands on it that was hours and hours and hours of manual labor.
Well,
I remember, because I remember having to do the process before we brought you on.
my understanding is that I eventually got it down to a point where I was doing everything within a week that Sean couldn't do in a month.
Yeah.
And that was the problem, is he couldn't do it in a month. But he had weird personal problems that
we won't go into. But there was an automation part of this that you brought to the company that was really unique. I mean, we had a little bit of, certainly we've had, Raymond Busboom, who's not afraid to do some automating in Excel in his, in his spare time. But you were really that first individual that helped us see, hey, you guys can take this to a whole other level. And it worked out really well for us, and you seemed to enjoy the position, and you got to mess around and learn and get better at a few things on your end. And
Yeah.
How long ago was that? How many years ago was that you?
I was hired in 2007, so
2007.
October 1st, 2007, and the interesting thing that happened after that is I couldn't stand the Excel script that you were using to create the quotes, so I immediately forced you to give that over to me, and I started creating the quotes. It was about January or February when I started doing that, and it just made it so much easier for me because I could stop working on those quotes so much because I was able to incorporate a whole bunch more information in the initial thing. I mean, the initial quotes, you had to change this to that and this to that, and you had to do every single one of them.
So what I love about this story so far is when we thought we had this cool little automated Excel routine, and when we would share that with other resellers, they were blown away at that level of automation. Right? They thought we were like just outrageously intelligent and ahead of our time. And then we got introduced to you, and you found like a whole new level of taking, which we talk about this all the time as a company, but this is just another great example of if you find the right people and plug them in and give them, the clear out the runway so they can just work and do their magic. It's incredible what happens within this company, and you certainly have. There's 3 or 4 of those things that we point right back to you and say, wow, that's a clear improvement that literally saved weeks or days of man hours and compressed it to hours or minutes of computers doing the hard work, which is what we should be doing, right? So
exactly, and basically we've probably quadrupled the number of renewal seats since
absolutely. Customers since you started that easily,
and it still takes me about a week.
We haven't had to add any additional manpower. It's been a good experience. Good. So that's a nice little walk down, getting to know Claire and background and all that great stuff. And so now let's take a few minutes and just talk about current status. So my T-shirt that I'm proudly wearing was born out of a bit of bad news that happened with you. And most everybody that's involved with Go Engineer is highly aware of that. So I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on the history of that, but I know there's a bunch of people who would love just to get a current update on Claire and what his world is right now and how that battle with cancer is going right now.
So the current status is that I've been doing chemotherapy for since about January 1st-ish, maybe the first part of January, let's leave it at that. And they've got me on 2 drugs. I get doxorubicin the first week of the cycle and Alera. The second week of the cycle I get Alera, and the third week of the cycle I get a Recover. It's the doxorubicin, it's the real killer drug. It was originally made from Agent Orange. So
that's all you need to know about. It's not a great thing to be putting in your body then, right?
No, not at all. There's a lifetime maximum of 8 doses of doxorubicin, and I will be getting my 7th coming up this coming Monday. On dose 6, that's the one that really knocked me for a loop. I've been just miserable for the past 2 weeks because it's just so exhausting. It puts me to sleep. I got it on Monday, then I came into work on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, it just knocked me out completely. On Sunday, I had myself a delicious Apollo burger, but since the doxorubicin has changed my taste buds, it wasn't all that delicious. It tasted...
So you're going with the delicious based on historical evidence,
Yeah.
not at the moment.
Yeah.
Got it.
So I had that delicious, which wasn't all that delicious, and then and afterwards I just got a pain in my stomach, and I went to bed and stayed in bed for it must have been another 14 hours before I got out of bed, and then I started feeling normal again, and then the next day I had a roast beef from Arby's, and again it put me right in the pain zone, and I was just hurting all over. So here's the funny story about that, is that I was bitching and moaning to my nurse about the pain that I was having, and I said to her, and then I had this Apollo burger, and she goes, "Ooh!" And I'm like, holy shit, have I done something really terrible that I shouldn't have? And I'm like, what do you mean by ooh? And she's like, never mind. I'm like, no, tell me what.
Yeah, expand on that ooh. Yeah.
Expand on that ooh. And she's like, this sounds really good. I think I'm gonna have that for lunch.
Well, good. I feel less guilty because when you were telling me the story of that in Arby's, I started to kind of drift off into meat. So now I don't feel as bad because the nurse did as well.
Yeah, well, apparently it's kind of boring now that you told me that you were drifting off.
You throw out some delicious Apollo burger and Arby's sandwich stuff. You can't hold me accountable to stay on task.
Yeah, but you know my stories too. You know that they usually end up somewhere amusing.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think we've covered just about everything I could dream of covering, and certainly people who haven't had quality Claire time get a great indication about why we love working with Claire at Go Engineer, and how impactful he has been in the success and growth of our company. And
I've made us millions and millions of dollars.
There we go. And of course, Earl will take all of that credit because he's the guy that hired you. You know how that works.
Well, I have something amusing to say about Earl.
Oh, anything that you have to say about Earl is fair game. So please, and it won't be edited either. So go for it.
Here's what I found out: the way that you make Earl happy. Number one, be perfect, and number two, call him an asshole often.
And with that, Claire, thank you very much. It's been an honor, brother.